On October 17, 2015, a large duffel bag was discovered abandoned along the desolate stretch of Highway 12. In rural Greene County, an elderly man, finding the bag suspicious, called 911. When the responding officer arrived, they attempted to lift the unusually heavy bag, but couldn't manage. Deciding to investigate further, they unzipped the bag and uncovered something that would haunt them forever. At the center of this tragedy were the Smith-Jones family, a blended family with a seemingly perfect facade. John Smith Oliver, a successful businessman in his late 40s, was born on November 12, 1982, in Jacksonville, Florida. Growing up in a middle-class family, John was raised with strong values and a strong work ethic. His parents, both high school sweethearts, instilled in him a sense of responsibility and ambition. John's early life was marked by quiet determination, a trait that would serve him well in his future endeavors. As he entered adulthood, John's charisma and natural leadership abilities began to shine, earning him a reputation as a rising star in his chosen field. He married Emily Jones, a beautiful and charming woman in her mid-30s, 6 years ago. Together they had formed a tight-knit family, with their children from previous marriages, John Smith and his ex-wife, Natasha Smith. Their story began over 2 decades ago in the year 1990, when they were both young and ambitious, chasing their dreams in the bustling city of New York. They met at a networking event where John, a rising star in the finance world, was giving a presentation on investment strategies. Natasha, a brilliant marketing executive, was in the audience and was immediately impressed by John's confidence and charisma. After the presentation, they struck up a conversation, and John was drawn to Natasha's intelligence, creativity, and beauty. They exchanged numbers, and their first date was a dinner meeting at a trendy restaurant in Manhattan. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and they quickly discovered that they shared a passion for business, art, and travel. As their relationship blossomed, they supported each other's careers and ambitions. John's finance company took off, with Natasha's marketing expertise helping him secure high-profile clients. Meanwhile, Natasha's marketing firm flourished, with John's financial guidance enabling her to expand her business. Together they built a business empire, with John's company becoming a leading player in the finance industry, and Natasha's marketing firm winning numerous awards. They were the golden couple of New York City, admired and respected by their peers. Their personal life was equally successful. They married in a lavish ceremony at a luxurious estate in the Hamptons. Surrounded by friends, family, and business associates, they had a beautiful son, Parker, who was the center of their universe. However, as time passed, cracks began to appear in their seemingly perfect relationship. John's long hours and frequent travel took a toll on their marriage, and Natasha felt increasingly lonely and neglected. She threw herself into her work, but the distance between them grew. Despite their efforts to reconcile, the rift between them deepened. They began to argue more frequently, and their conversations became strained. The tension between them was evident, and their friends and family noticed the change. One fateful night, they had a bitter argument at a charity gala, in front of their colleagues and friends. The altercation ended with Natasha storming out of the event, leaving John alone and humiliated. The final blow came when John that Natasha was having an affair with a younger man, a talented artist she had met at a gallery opening. The revelation devastated John, and he realized that their marriage was beyond repair. Their divorce was a messy and public affair, with both sides engaging in a bitter custody battle over Parker. In the end, they shared joint custody, but the damage was done. Their once adoring relationship had ended in acrimony and heartbreak. John was left to pick up the pieces, his personal and professional life in shambles. He threw himself into his work, using his business as a distraction from the pain of his failed marriage. But the wound of his divorce never fully healed, and he carried the scars with him for years to come. Not long after their divorce in 2006, Natasha's health began to decline rapidly. She had been hiding a devastating secret. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and it had spread aggressively throughout her body. Despite her brave fight, she succumbed to the disease. Just a year after their divorce, on the 2nd day of March 2007, John was shocked and heartbroken by her passing. Despite their tumultuous end, he had never stopped loving her, and her death brought up a mix of emotions he thought he had long buried. He attended her funeral, where he saw the impact of her passing on their son, Parker, who was struggling to cope with the loss of his mother. In 2008, as John navigated his grief, he met Emily Jones, a kind and gentle soul who was a friend of a friend. She was a widow herself, having lost her husband to a tragic accident just a few years prior. They bonded over their shared experiences of loss and heartache, and John found himself drawn to her warmth and compassion. Despite his initial reservations about remarrying, John found himself falling deeply in love with Emily. She brought light and joy back into his life, and he was grateful for her presence. They married in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family, in 2009. John's son, Parker, 22, was a charismatic and outgoing young man who had always been close to his father. Emily's daughter, Avery, 25, was a stunning and vivacious young woman who had quickly become the center of attention in the family. To outsiders, the Smith-Jones family appeared to be a loving and supportive unit. On October 18, 2015, everything changed for the Smith-Jones family. On that fateful morning, when Avery's lifeless body was discovered, strapped inside a large duffel bag, discarded along the desolate stretch of Highway 12. In rural Greene County, the gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the small community, and the family's perfect facade began to crumble. As investigators processed the crime scene, they found that Avery's body had been brutally mutilated, with evidence of severe trauma and struggle. The once agile young woman, who had been full of life and promise, had met a horrific end. The news of Avery's murder sent her family into grief and confusion. Avery had left home 2 days ago, dropping a text that she was going to be with her boyfriend Adrian and be back the following week. When the gruesome discovery of Avery's body was made, Detective Matthews was immediately put in charge of the case. On October 19th, the police began questioning the Smiths in their home. The first person that was interviewed was Parker. The police listened intently as Parker shared his honest thoughts about his relationship with Avery. When he was asked if he had a close relationship with his stepsister, Parker explained that he had never felt close to his stepsister, and it wasn't because of anything Avery had done. Rather, it was because he had struggled to accept his father's decision to remarry after his mother's passing. He had felt loyal to his mother's memory and presented the idea of another woman taking her place. The police interviewed John, who was alone with Parker at home, since Emily was away on a business trip. John stated that Avery was private and didn't confide in anyone, including her mother. However, he later revealed that Avery was close with his son, Parker contradicting Parker's earlier statement. John described their relationship as sibling-like, with a deep affection for each other. He noted that seemed to know Parker about Avery's life than anyone else in the family. When asked about his whereabouts on the day Avery left home, John provided an alibi stating he was at work from 8:1000 to 5 p.m. He mentioned a meeting with colleagues around lunchtime, which could confirm his alibi. The police investigated and found inconsistencies between John's and Parker's statements, including their differing accounts of Avery and Parker's relationship. The police were able to confirm John's alibi through his colleagues, but the discrepancies in the family member statements raised further questions. On October 21, 2015, the forensics performed an autopsy on the dismembered body of Avery, and when they were done, they provided the report of their findings to the police. They found out that she was suffocated to death before she was dismembered, based on the cuts on the body. The murder weapon was suspected to be a big knife, a butcher knife, probably. They went through the files of the deceased. There was no important clue that could lead them to the killer, and they summoned the Smiths to provide their statements at the station. On the 22nd, they were summoned. John was questioned about when he last saw or heard from Avery before she left. John thought for a moment and answered that he remembered coming home early on the 16th to pick up something he forgot, around 2 or 3 p.m. He had thought he heard Avery's voice coming from Parker's room. He continued that he had knocked on the door, but there was no response. The door was locked, and when he knocked and got no response, he believed everyone was out, so he didn't think much of it. The police jotted down his statement as he spoke. Then John showed them the text he got from her, that she was going to visit Adrian. They asked who he was, and John said that he was Avery's boyfriend. He added that he found it strange because she had never texted him about such matters and her outings with him before. The police got a new lead and immediately found out his address, which was gotten from Parker after he was questioned. Adrian Gareth was apprehended and questioned. They asked him why he murdered Avery, and he denied seeing her. Not to talk of murdering someone he used to cherish. He added that the last time he saw her was 2 months prior, and that was because they broke up. They checked his activities a week before the murder, and they checked the alibi he provided on his activities on the 16th that the victim left home. They confirmed it and he was let free. Now the cops were back to the beginning. There was no lead. They tracked the deceased phone, her number provided by her stepfather, but they came to a dead end, also because they found it in a pile of trash, not far from where the body had been found. They went over the case file again, confirming the statements they have gotten, and the focus fell on John's son Parker. He had said he was not close to the victim, but he seemed to know more about her than her stepfather, and even knew the details of her boyfriend. The next day, on October 23rd, 2 police officers visited the Smith-Jones residence. This time around, Parker was summoned to the living room, where he was questioned about his whereabouts on the day the deceased left home. Parker claimed he was at a friend's place on that day. They pressed for more details, asking Parker what he was doing between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. that day. They noticed that he hesitated before answering. He responded that he had been home sleeping, The police suspected that he was lying. They checked the book, which had the written statement of his father, that he had knocked on Parker's door, and nobody had responded. They began to probe further. Parker answered the questions they asked. The police decided to thoroughly investigate Parker's alibi by contacting the individuals he had provided as references. However, when they reached out to these contacts, they were met with a surprising revelation. None of them could confirm Parker's presence on the day in question. In fact, all of them denied ever seeing Parker on that day, contradicting his earlier statement. This new information raised suspicions, and the police decided to take their investigation a step further. They requested access to the CCTV footage from cameras in the vicinity of the Smiths' residence, hoping to gather more evidence. After obtaining the footage, they carefully reviewed it and made a significant discovery. The CCTV footage revealed that Parker had driven his father's car out of the compound around 7 p.m. on October 16th, a crucial detail that contradicted his earlier statement. This new evidence suggested that Parker may have been involved in Avery's disappearance, and the police began to investigate him. Further, the fact that he had used his father's car and had been seen leaving the compound around the time Avery went missing raised serious questions about his involvement. The police were determined to get to the bottom of the mystery and uncover the truth behind Avery's disappearance. Immediately, they requested a warrant to search the home of Smith Jones, and on October 24th, a search was made. Parker's room was searched, and what they saw surprised them. There were several duffel bags of the same color as the one Avery was found in. They searched his dresser drawer. They found a pair of gloves and a butchering knife. There was bloodstain on the knife. It was no doubt the same one he had used in the dismemberment of the deceased. On October 24th, they found enough evidence to arrest Parker, who had been watching the whole time. He claimed that he was innocent, but the police dragged him to their van, where he was taken to the district to be investigated. The forensics team found bloodstains in his room, and the pillow he had used to suffocate the girl had her DNA. There were some other things found in the room that pointed out that the two step-siblings were close and intimate. When the police brought all the evidence they had before Parker, he couldn't deny it anymore, and he broke down in tears, and he confessed to his crime. He hadn't intentionally killed Avery, no matter what the cops might think. In truth, he had grown to care for her deeply. Their affair had started innocently enough, with a moment of comfort that had turned into something more. He said that, the first time they had undressed each other, Avery had been crying, her body shaking with sobs, after a fierce argument with her boyfriend over the phone. He had been the only one around, and he had gone to comfort her. They had ended up on the same bed, and somehow their mutual attraction had taken over. He continued that Avery had been vulnerable, and he had been drawn to her fragility. He had held her close, feeling her warm tears on his skin, and before he knew it, they were kissing. It was a gentle, tender moment, but it had sparked something deeper within them. He continued that, as they had undressed each other, he had felt a sense of excitement mixed with guilt. They were step-siblings, after all, and their parents would never approve. But they couldn't help themselves. They had been drawn to each other like magnets, their bodies craving each other's touch. That first time had been awkward, yet passionate. They had explored each other's bodies, discovering new pleasures and desires. Parker had felt alive, like he had finally found someone who understood him. From that moment on, they had been inseparable. They would steal glances at each other. During family gatherings, their hands touching under the table. They would sneak around, finding moments to be alone. To kiss, to make love. Parker had never felt that way about anyone before. He had lied to the police, but it was only to protect their secret. He hadn't meant to hurt Avery, and he certainly hadn't meant to kill her. He mentioned the events of that fateful day. Avery had come to his room, eager to rekindle their affair, and he had been hesitant at first, but she had been persuasive. As they began to undress, he had felt a mix of excitement and fear, knowing that they could be discovered at any moment. And then the knock on the door had come. Sending his heart racing, he had panicked, fearing that his father or stepmother had discovered them. In a split second, he had made a decision that would haunt him forever. He had placed the pillow over Avery's face, trying to muffle her voice, which was beginning to rise in panic. He had thought it would calm her down, but in reality, it had done the opposite. Avery had struggled beneath him, her body tensing up in fear. But Parker had been too caught up in his own panic to notice. He had been frozen, his mind racing with thoughts of being discovered. And he hadn't realized that Avery had stopped moving. It wasn't until he had lifted the pillow, thinking that the coast was clear, that he had seen her lifeless eyes staring back at him. He had been in shock, unable to comprehend what had happened. He had tried to revive her, but it was too late. Avery was gone. He had then tried to fit her into one of his duffel bags, the room, but her body didn't fit in. He was trembling and did the unthinkable. He took the butchering knife in the kitchen and separated her body parts and fit them perfectly in his bag. He then drove off in his dad's other car and dumped the bag in a desolate stretch of Highway 12. After the confession, the police realized that Parker's affair had gone from a moment of pleasure to destruction. The police allowed Mr. John to see his son behind the bars, while they held Mrs. Emily, who they had called to inform her on her trip the previous day about the death of her daughter. They held her from holding her husband and badgering him with her heels. She had collapsed after seeing the horrid body of her daughter she had seen healthy before she left for her journey. It was a commotion, and John had told the police that he would bring his lawyers to free his son, claiming his son was innocent, and he had been coerced to admit the crime. The news about the Smith-Jones spread around like wildfire, and several articles were written to condemn the act of the boy. Some articles wrote that the boy did it unintentionally and must face a minor punishment, but the articles were bombarded and forced to be taken down, since it was a very sensitive topic. Several people followed the story to know what would happen to Parker. On November 1st, Parker was in court for his crimes. He was found guilty and got a life sentence. Parker's dad, John, was very upset and shouted at the judge. He didn't think the sentence was fair. The security guards took John out of the courtroom. Emily, Avery's mum, was very sad and cried a lot. She was still grieving for her daughter. The courtroom was a mess, with everyone upset and emotional. Parker's actions had caused a lot of pain and suffering. Should he face a dire penalty for his crime, even though he didn't intentionally murder his stepsister? Some argued that his reckless actions still warranted severe punishment, while others believed that a lesser sentence would be more fitting. Could John still live with Emily, despite his son's horrific actions against her child?